The message came screaming across every channel in the galaxy. It was not elegant, it was not diplomatic. It was the sound of a dying world begging for someone to care. Please, anyone. They are killing us. Our children are burning. Please help us. The Velioth had never asked anyone for anything before. They were a quiet species, crystalline beings whose bodies caught the light and turned it into rainbows. They had no weapons. They had no soldiers. For 10,000 years, they had devoted themselves to art, to music, to preserving the memories of every species they had ever met. Their world was a library of the galaxy's history, stored in crystals that sang when you touched them. Now that world was on fire. The Kethvar Dominion had come without warning. Their warships darkened the skies of Velioth Prime like a swarm of metal locusts. They wanted the planet. They wanted its resources. And they did not care that millions of innocent beings lived there. The first bombs fell at dawn. By noon, 3 cities had been reduced to glass and ash. On the space station called Axis Point, the leaders of 347 species gathered to discuss what to do. The Galactic Concord had kept peace for 4,000 years. Surely they would act. Surely they would send help. Ambassador Tethuna of the Sithrani stood before the Great Assembly. His species was old and powerful. When he spoke, others listened. "We have received the distress call from the Velioth," he said. His voice was calm, almost bored. "We must now discuss our response." One by one, the species spoke, and one by one, they said the same thing. The Velioth were not members of the Concord. They had chosen neutrality long ago. This meant they were outside the protection of Concord law. Legally, no one had any obligation to help them. The Kethvar Dominion was powerful. Their fleet numbered over 400 warships. Any species that challenged them would suffer terrible losses. Was it worth it? Was it wise? And besides, if the Concord intervened in one conflict, they would have to intervene in all conflicts. Where would it end? Better to do nothing. Better to stay neutral. Better to be safe. "We mourn with the Velioth," Ambassador Tethuna said finally, "but the Concord cannot bleed for those beyond our protection. I move that we send humanitarian aid after the conflict has concluded, and nothing more." The vote was quick. 320 species voted yes. They would do nothing. They would wait until the killing stopped, and then they would send doctors to treat the survivors, if there were any survivors. Admiral Elena Vasquez watched from the human delegation's seats. She was 62 years old with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She had studied Earth's history. She knew what happened when good people did nothing. She knew the names: Rwanda, Bosnia, Myanmar, all the places where the world had said never again and then stood by while innocents died. She pulled out her communicator and typed a message to Earth Command. "They're going to let them die." The response came from Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen, the highest-ranking military officer in human space. Chen was 70 years old, a veteran of 3 wars. He had buried friends. He had made impossible choices. And he had never forgotten why he had become a soldier in the first place. "Not if we have anything to say about it. Mobilize the 3rd Fleet. Full deployment. We're not asking permission." Vasquez read the message twice. Then she smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knew that the right thing and the easy thing were never the same. The assembly was emptying. Species were leaving, already forgetting the Velioth, already moving on to other business. In the corner of the great chamber, a single figure stood alone. Crystalline Resonator Eleveth was the Velioth ambassador. Their body was made of living crystal, pale blue and translucent. Normally, they shimmered with inner light. Now that light had dimmed to almost nothing. They were weeping. Velioth did not cry tears. Instead, their crystals vibrated with grief, producing a sound so sad that anyone who heard it felt their heart break. No one approached them. No one offered comfort. The other ambassadors walked past without looking, as if Aleveth had already ceased to exist. Then a hand touched their shoulder. Aleveth turned. Admiral Vasquez stood there, her face hard but her eyes kind. "Pack what records you can save," Vasquez said. "Contact your people. Tell them to hold on." "Why?" Alabeth's voice was barely a whisper. The Concord has spoken. No one is coming. The Concord has spoken, Vasquez agreed, but humanity has not, and we have a different answer. I do not understand. Vasquez leaned closer. We're coming. All of us. Every ship we have. Tell your people to survive for 3 more days. That's all I ask. 3 days. Alabeth stared at her. In 4,000 years, no species had ever defied the Concord's will. No species had ever risked war for a people who were not their own. It was not logical. It was not safe. It was not sane. Why would you do this? Alabeth asked. We have nothing to offer you. We cannot repay you. We are strangers. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. She thought about her grandmother, who had fled a burning village as a child. She thought about the soldiers who had come too late to save her grandmother's parents. She thought about the promise humanity had made to itself, over and over, every time it failed to keep it. Because you asked for help, she said simply. Isn't that enough? She turned and walked away, already speaking into her communicator, already giving orders, already setting in motion events that would change the galaxy forever. Elabeth watched her go. Then, for the first time in days, their crystal body began to glow again. It was faint. It was fragile. But it was hope. 3 days. They had to hold on for 3 days. On Earth, the message went out to every ship, every station, every soldier in human space. It was not a request. It was not a suggestion. It was a call to arms. The Velioth are dying. The galaxy has abandoned them. We have not. Report to your stations. We launch in 6 hours. Across 100 worlds, humans answered. They left their families. They said goodbye to their children. They knew they might not come back. And they went anyway, because someone had asked for help. And for humanity, that had always been enough. The fleet began to gather. And the galaxy, which had thought it knew everything about the young species called humanity, was about to learn how wrong it had been. The Galactic Concord had always believed that humanity was a minor species, young, aggressive, but ultimately unimportant. Their intelligence reports said that humanity had perhaps 50 warships, small vessels designed for local defense. Nothing that could challenge a real power, nothing that mattered. They were wrong. From Earth's orbital shipyards, the ships began to launch. First came the destroyers, sleek and fast, their hulls painted black to disappear against the void. Then came the cruisers, bristling with weapons that the Concord had never seen. Then came the carriers, vast as cities, their bays filled with thousands of fighter craft. And finally, from hidden bases in the asteroid belt, came the dreadnoughts. These were ships that humanity had told the Concord were decommissioned, obsolete, scrapped for parts. But they had been waiting in the darkness all along, maintained in secret, crewed by volunteers who knew that someday they might be needed. 200 warships gathered in formation above Earth. 200 ships that should not exist. 200 ships that the Concord had never known about. Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UES Defiance. He was an old man with a scarred face and steady hands. Behind him stood his officers, Captain Amara Okonkwo, his tactical officer, whose ancestors had fought against empires on Earth, and Commander James Redhawk, whose Lakota great-grandfather had once told him stories about promises broken and cavalry that never came. All ships report ready, Admiral, Okonkwo said. Chen nodded. Then let's go save some people. The fleet jumped into hyperspace, and across the galaxy, alarm bells began to ring. On Axis Point Station, Ambassador Tithuna stared at his screen in disbelief. 200 human warships. It was impossible. It was insane. Where had they come from? How had humanity hidden such a force? He immediately contacted Earth's government. Secretary General Yuki Tanaka appeared on his screen. She was a small woman with silver hair and the calm expression of someone who had expected this call. You demand an explanation? She said before he could speak. Very well, here it is. You told us the galaxy was dangerous. You told us to be afraid. So we prepared. We built. We trained. We just never told you how much. This is a violation of Concord transparency agreements, Tethuna sputtered. You are required to report your military strength. We reported what we wanted you to know, Tanaka smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a rescue operation to coordinate. The screen went dark. The Conquered was paralyzed. If they condemned humanity, they risked pushing Earth out of the Alliance entirely. But if they supported this action, they would be endorsing exactly the kind of unilateral military intervention they had spent 4,000 years preventing. In the end, they did what they did best. They debated. They discussed. They formed committees. And while they talked, the human fleet flew on. The journey to Velioth Prime would take 2 days. Chen used that time to prepare his crews, to run simulations, to make sure everyone understood what they were about to face. The Kethvar Dominion had 450 warships waiting for them. Humanity was outnumbered more than 2 to 1, but numbers were not everything. Chen knew that his people were fighting for something the Kethvar did not understand. They were not fighting for territory or resources or power. They were fighting because it was right, and that made all the difference. On the second day, something unexpected happened. The Defiance's sensors detected ships approaching from the starboard side. Chen ordered his fleet to battle stations. Were the Kethvar trying to intercept them early? But these ships were not Kethvar. 3 vessels emerged from hyperspace. They were Korvathi frigates, small and old, their hulls scarred from decades of hard use. The Korvathi were a minor species, largely ignored by the Concord. 50 years ago, their colony world had been attacked by pirates. They had begged the Concord for help. The Concord had refused. The Korvathi had never forgotten. Their captain's voice came over the communication channel. His name was Vethgaral, and he spoke with the accent of someone who had learned human language from old movies. Admiral Chen, we heard what you are doing. Our ships are old, our weapons are weak, but we remember what it is like when no one comes. We will not be that silence for others. Before Chen could respond, more ships appeared. A Morthax heavy cruiser, crewed by beings who looked like walking boulders. Their world had been conquered once, long ago. They had freed themselves through blood and sacrifice. They understood what the Velioth were facing, a squadron of Belathi interceptors, piloted by insectoid beings whose hive queen had declared that no species should face extinction alone. A Talvari destroyer, captained by a woman who simply said, "My daughter asked me what being brave meant. I wanted to show her." One by one they came. Ships from species the Concord had ignored. Ships from species the Concord had abandoned. Ships from species who remembered what it felt like to cry for help and hear only silence. By the time the fleet reached the edge of Velioth space, 40 additional ships had joined them. They were not Concord sanctioned. They were not legal. They were simply beings who had decided that enough was enough. Chen looked at the tactical display, at the patchwork fleet that had gathered around his ships. Humans and Korvathi, and Morthax and Belathi, and a dozen others, all flying together toward almost certain death. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. "This is Admiral Chen. I want to thank all of you for joining us. I know this isn't your fight. I know you have nothing to gain and everything to lose. But you came anyway. Because somewhere right now innocent people are dying. And you couldn't stand by and watch." He paused, looking at the stars ahead. "We're not here for politics. We're not here for territory. We're not here for glory. We're here because someone asked for help. That's enough reason. That's always been enough reason. In a few hours, we will face an enemy that outnumbers us and outguns us. Some of us will not survive. But every one of us will know that we did the right thing. And that matters. That will always matter. All ships prepare for combat. Let's go save the Velioth." The fleet roared forward, a river of metal and fire, carrying hope toward a dying world. And on Velioth Prime, where the cities burned and the children hid in caves, crystalline resonator. Eliveth looked up at the smoke-filled sky and whispered a prayer to gods they had almost stopped believing in. "Please let them come in time. Please." The prayer echoed into the darkness, and somewhere in the void, 240 ships flew faster. Commander Kethrick stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath, and watched his fleet reduce another Velioth city to rubble. It was beautiful in its way. The crystal towers shattered like glass, sending rainbows of light across the smoke-filled sky before collapsing into dust. The Velioth had no weapons, no defenses, no hope. This was not a war. It was an execution. His communications officer interrupted his thoughts. "Commander, we are detecting incoming vessels. 240 signatures." Kethrix frowned. The Concord had voted against intervention. He had watched the broadcast himself. So who would be foolish enough to challenge the Dominion? "Identify them." "Human warships, Commander, along with vessels from several minor species." Kethrix laughed. Humans? Those primitives who had only discovered faster-than-light travel 60 years ago? They were insects compared to the Dominion, and the minor species with them were even less impressive. This was not a rescue fleet. It was a collection of fools rushing toward their own destruction. "Open a channel," he ordered. A face appeared on his screen, an old human with gray hair and cold eyes. He wore a military uniform covered in medals. "Unknown vessels," Kethrix said. "You are entering Dominion operational space. The world below belongs to us now. Withdraw immediately, or you will be destroyed." The human's expression did not change. "This is Admiral Marcus Chen of the United Earth Defense Fleet. You are engaged in the unlawful destruction of a civilian population. You have 1 hour to withdraw. After that, we will remove you." Kethrix stared at the screen. Then he laughed again, longer and louder than before. "1 hour? You threaten me with 1 hour? Do you know how many ships I have? Do you know what the Dominion has conquered? Worlds without number, species without count. And you, with your pathetic little fleet, think you can remove me?" Chen's face remained calm. 1 hour. Use it wisely." The screen went dark. Kethrix shook his head in amusement. "These humans are insane. Let them come. Let them watch their ships burn. It will be a good lesson for the galaxy." 1 hour passed. The human fleet advanced, and Kethrix learned too late that he had made a terrible mistake. Human tactical doctrine was unlike anything the Dominion had ever faced. Concord species fought in formal formations, following rules of engagement that had not changed in centuries. Humans fought like they were born for war. The first wave was electronic. Human ships flooded the Dominion's communication networks with garbage data, blinding their sensors and isolating their squadrons from each other. Kethrix found himself shouting orders that his captains could not hear. The second wave was physical. Stealth destroyers appeared behind the Dominion lines, emerging from nowhere. Their black hulls invisible against the void until they opened fire. Capital ships exploded before their crews even knew they were under attack. The third wave was overwhelming. Human carriers launched thousands of autonomous drones, small and fast and expendable, screening the larger vessels from enemy fire. The drones died in waves, but for every one destroyed, 10 more took its place. And behind the drones came the dreadnoughts. These were the ships humanity had hidden for decades. Massive vessels, kilometers long, their hulls thick enough to shrug off direct hits. They plowed through the Dominion formation like wolves through sheep, their weapons tearing enemy cruisers apart with contemptuous ease. Captain Amara Okonkwo coordinated the battle from the Defiance's tactical center. Her ancestors had fought against British colonizers, against apartheid, against every enemy that had tried to crush them. She had inherited their stubbornness, their refusal to accept defeat. Morthak's cruiser, swing to port and cover the Korvathi frigates. Belathi squadron, target those destroyers on the left flank. Human carriers, launch second wave of drones. The Allied ships fought alongside the humans, each in their own style. The Korvathi darted and weaved, firing quick shots before disappearing. The Morthaks absorbed punishment that would have destroyed lesser ships, then returned fire with devastating force. The Belathi moved as one, their hive mind coordination allowing them to anticipate enemy movements. But it was Commander James Redhawk who delivered the crucial blow. He led a squadron of fast attack ships in a flanking maneuver, swinging wide around the battle to hit the Dominion formation from behind. His grandfather had told him stories about Crazy Horse, about warriors who struck where the enemy least expected. Now Redhawk honored that memory. His squadron hit the Dominion supply ships, destroying the vessels that carried fuel and ammunition. Without supplies, the enemy warships began to falter. Their weapons fire slowed. Their engines sputtered. For the first time in the battle, Kethrix felt fear. "Fall back," he ordered. "Regroup around the Wrath." But as his fleet gathered around the flagship, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Below them, a convoy of refugee ships was launching from the planet's surface. Thousands of Velioth survivors, packed into civilian transports, fleeing toward the human lines. Easy targets. If he could not win the battle, Kethris decided, he would at least complete his mission. He would destroy the Velioth, every last one of them. All weapons, target the refugee convoy, he ordered. Fire! The Dominion's Wrath was the largest ship in the fleet. Its weapons could destroy cities. The refugee convoy had no weapons, no shields, no protection, except one. The UES Defiance appeared between the flagship and the convoy. It was already damaged, its hull torn and burning from earlier hits. But it moved into position anyway, placing itself directly in the line of fire. On the bridge, Admiral Chen gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered around him. Blood ran down his face from a wound on his forehead. His left arm hung useless at his side, broken in 3 places. "Admiral," his helmsman shouted, "we can't take another hit like that." "Then we take the hit anyway," Chen replied. "We didn't come this far to watch them die in our shadow." The Dominion's Wrath fired again. The Defiance rocked, flames erupting from a dozen sections. Crew members screamed as compartments decompressed. The lights flickered and died, but the ship held. And behind it, the refugee convoy flew on. Chen looked at his weapons officer. "All batteries. Fire!" The Defiance was dying. Everyone knew it. But dying ships can still fight. And the Defiance had one last gift to give. Every weapon the ship possessed fired at once. Missiles, energy beams, mass drivers, all concentrated on a single point, the engine section of the Dominion's Wrath. The flagship's engines exploded. The massive vessel began to spin, out of control, its weapons falling silent. Kethric stared at his displays in disbelief. His ship was crippled. His fleet was in chaos, and the humans were still coming. "All ships," he broadcast, his voice shaking. "Retreat! Retreat!" The Dominion fleet scattered. 450 ships had entered the battle. 200 escaped. The rest were wreckage, floating dead in the void around Velioth Prime. But victory had cost the Allies dearly. 40 human ships were destroyed. 15 Allied vessels would never fly again. 3,000 humans were dead. 500 allies had fallen. On the burning bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Chen watched the enemy retreat. His ship was finished. He knew that. But the refugee convoy was safe. The Velioth survivors were safe. A medic tried to treat his wounds. He waved her away. "Get those people off the surface," he ordered, his voice barely a whisper. "Every last one. Don't stop until they're all safe." Then he closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. The battle was over. The Velioth were saved, and the galaxy would never be the same. The surface of Velioth Prime was still burning when the human ships began landing. They came down in waves, medical shuttles, cargo vessels, troop transports. Human soldiers poured out onto the scorched earth, but they did not carry weapons raised. They carried stretchers, medical kits, food and water, blankets for the survivors who had lost everything. The Velioth emerged from their hiding places slowly, afraid that this was a trick, that the nightmare was not really over. But the humans did not hurt them. The humans helped them. Private Sofia Herrera was 20 years old. She had joined the military because she wanted to make a difference. Now she understood what that meant. She found a Velioth child hiding in the ruins of what had once been a beautiful building. The child's crystal body was cracked, dim, barely alive. Sophia did not know Velioth biology. She did not know their language, but she knew how to hold someone who was afraid. She sat down beside the child and wrapped her arms around them. She hummed softly a lullaby her mother had sung to her. She had heard that Velioth found comfort in vibrations, in sounds. She did not know if it would help, but she had to try. The child's crystals began to glow, just slightly. They pressed closer to Sophia and made a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Nearby, crystalline resonator Eleveth walked through the refugee camp that humans had set up in the carrier bay of the U.S. Valor. Everywhere they looked, they saw the same scene. Human soldiers carrying Velioth wounded, human doctors treating Velioth injuries, human volunteers distributing food and comfort. Eleveth approached Sophia, who still held the child in her arms. Why? They asked. Their voice was soft, confused. Your people did not know us. We had nothing to offer you. We are strangers. Why would you die for strangers? Sophia looked up. Her face was tired and tear-streaked. She had not slept in 3 days. She had watched friends die in the battle, but her eyes were kind. You asked for help, she said. Isn't that enough? Aleveth had no answer. In 4,000 years of galactic civilization, they had never heard those words spoken with such simple sincerity. 2 weeks later, humanity faced its reckoning. The Galactic Concord convened an emergency session on Axis Point Station. The Great Chamber was packed with ambassadors from 347 species, and in the center, facing them all, stood the human delegation. Secretary General Yuki Tanaka led them. She was small and old and looked fragile enough to break, but her eyes were iron. Beside her stood Admiral Marcus Chen. He had survived, barely. His arm was still in a sling. Burn scars covered half his face. Doctors had told him to rest. He had ignored them. Captain Amara Okonkwo stood at attention, her uniform decorated with medals for valor. And behind them all, invited as a witness, stood crystalline resonator Aleveth. Ambassador Tethuna of the Sitharani rose to speak first. His voice echoed through the chamber, heavy with authority. Humanity stands accused of the following crimes against Concord law. First, unauthorized military action outside human space. Second, violation of neutrality accords. Third, concealment of military assets. Fourth, incitement of violence against a sovereign power. He paused, letting the charges sink in. The penalty for these crimes is expulsion from the Concord and economic sanctions. How does humanity respond? Tanaka stepped forward. The chamber fell silent. You asked how we respond. I will tell you. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of ambassadors who had voted to let the Veliath die. You want to know why we did this. You want to know what humanity gained. So let me tell you, we gained nothing. We lost 40 warships. We lost 3,000 soldiers. We gained a ruined world that will take decades to rebuild. We gained refugees who have nothing but the crystals they carry. We gained enemies in the Kethvar Dominion who will remember this humiliation for generations. We gained nothing, and we would do it again tomorrow. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Tanaka raised her hand for silence. You are asking the wrong question. Do not ask what we gained. Ask what you lost. You lost the Valiath. You were willing to let an entire species, their art, their history, their children, be erased from existence, and you would have slept fine. You would have returned to your homes and your lives, and you would have forgotten them within a year. Her voice grew harder. You talk about peace. But your peace is just cowardice dressed in fancy words. Your peace means doing nothing while innocents burn. Your peace means turning away because helping is hard. That is not peace. That is complicity. She turned to leave, then paused. We are not sorry. We will never be sorry. Do what you will. The chamber erupted. Ambassadors shouted accusations and demands. Some called for immediate sanctions. Others demanded humanity's complete expulsion. Then Aleveth rose. They were not a member of the Concord. They had no right to speak, but they spoke anyway. I was there. The chamber slowly quieted. Eleveth's crystal body glowed with soft blue light as they continued. I watched this assembly vote to abandon my people. I watched your ambassadors calculate the cost of our lives and decide we were not worth saving. And then I watched humans come anyway. They did not know us. They had no obligation to us. They came because we asked, only because we asked. The Concord speaks of peace, but you have only ever known the peace of distance, the peace of looking away. Humanity knows a different peace, the peace that comes after you have bled for someone, after you have sacrificed for someone, after you have proven that their lives matter. Aleveth turned to face the entire assembly. You taught us to fear the galaxy. Humanity taught us why it was worth saving. Silence. Complete absolute silence. Then slowly the Korvathi ambassador rose from their seat. We vote against sanctions. The Morthax ambassador stood. We vote against sanctions. One by one, species rose. species who had been abandoned, species who had been ignored, species who had joined humanity's fleet and fought beside them, species who had simply watched and felt shame. The vote was close. For a long moment, no one knew which way it would go. Then the final count was announced. 170 votes against sanctions. 177 votes for sanctions. Humanity was condemned, but only barely, and everyone in the chamber knew that the Concord would never be the same. As the delegates filed out, Admiral Chen caught Ambassador Tethuna's eye. The Sithrani looked away quickly, unable to hold the human's gaze. Chen smiled, though it hurt his scarred face. "We lost the vote," Okonkwo said quietly. "Did we?" Chen replied. "Look around. Count the species who stood with us. Count the ones who are ashamed of their own votes. Count the ones who will remember this day." He looked out at the stars beyond the station's windows. "We didn't come here to win a vote. We came here to do what was right, and the galaxy knows it." 3 months later, the sanctions were quietly dropped. Too many species had threatened to leave the Concord if they were enforced. The Concord needed humanity more than it needed its pride. And on Velioth Prime, the survivors began to rebuild. Human engineers worked alongside Velioth artisans, constructing new towers from the rubble of the old. It would take years. It would take decades. But they would do it together, because someone had asked for help, and humanity had answered. 10 years had passed since the Battle of Velioth Prime. The galaxy had changed, not in the ways the conquered had feared, with war and chaos spreading across known space, but in ways they had never expected, could never have predicted. It started small. A few species, inspired by what humanity had done, withdrew from the Concord to form a new alliance. They called themselves the Compact of the Willing. Their membership requirement was simple. If someone asked for help, you answer. Within 5 years, 15 species had joined. Within 10 years, the number had grown to 30. They were not the most powerful species in the galaxy. Many of them were small, weak, easy to ignore. But together, they were something new, something different. On Velioth Prime, the crystal spires rose again. Human architects had worked alongside Velioth artisans, blending two cultures into something beautiful. The new capital city shimmered in the sunlight, its towers singing harmonies that could be heard from kilometers away. At the city's center stood a monument. It was simple, a human hand reaching down to lift a crystalline figure to its feet. Beneath it, carved in 100 different languages, was a single word: together. Admiral Marcus Chen had not lived to see it completed. His injuries from the battle had never fully healed. He died 3 years after the war, surrounded by friends and family and a Velioth delegation that had traveled across the galaxy to be with him in his final moments. But his legacy lived on. Amara Okonkwo now held the rank of Fleet Admiral. She commanded the combined fleet from her flagship, the UES Elena Vasquez, named for the woman who had first said, "We're coming," in that dark hour when no one else would. The fleet had grown. 300 ships now flew under the banner of the Compact. Human vessels, Velioth crystal ships, Korvathi frigates, Morthax cruisers, and ships from a dozen other species. They trained together, flew together, lived and died together. They called themselves the fleet that answered. Okonkwo was reviewing tactical reports in her ready room when the call came in. "Admiral, we're receiving a distress signal from beyond Concord space." She was on the bridge within seconds. The communications officer played the message. It was garbled, corrupted by distance, but the meaning was clear. A species called the Aymari, never contacted, barely known, was sending a desperate plea. Their colony world was under attack by unknown aggressors. They were dying. They were begging for help from anyone listening. The Concord had already responded. They were forming committees, studying the situation, debating the proper course of action. Okonkwo did not wait for the debate to end. "Contact all compact vessels," she ordered. "We launch in 2 hours." The fleet mobilized with practiced efficiency. This was not the first time they had answered a call like this. Over the past decade, they had responded to 7 distress signals, saved 3 species from extinction, and delivered humanitarian aid to countless worlds. Each time the Concord had protested. Each time the compact had ignored them, and each time the galaxy had watched and remembered. As the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Okonkwo addressed them one final time. 10 years ago, a species we had never met asked for help. The galaxy said no. Humanity said yes, and everything changed. She looked at the tactical display, at the ships from 30 different species flying in formation around the Elena Vasquez. We were a single voice then, one species standing alone. Now look at us. Look at what we have become. Not because we sought power, not because we wanted glory, but because we answered when others would not. Somewhere out there, the Imari are dying. They have never met us. They have nothing to offer us. They are strangers in the dark, crying out for someone to care. We care. All ships prepare for transit. Let's go save some people. The fleet vanished into hyperspace, 300 points of light streaking toward the unknown. On the observation deck of the Elena Vasquez, an elderly Velioth watched the stars blur around them. Their name was Alaveth, and they had lived long enough to see their world burn and rise again. Beside them stood a young human ensign. Her name was Maria Herrera, the daughter of Sofia Herrera, who had once held a dying Velioth child in her arms and hummed a lullaby. Maria had grown up on stories of the battle. Her mother had told her about the fear and the courage and the terrible cost. She had told her about the moment when the Defiance took a hit meant for the refugee convoy. She had told her about Admiral Chen's last order: get them all to safety. Maria had joined the fleet as soon as she was old enough. She wanted to be part of the story. She wanted to carry it forward. "May I ask you something?" she said to Alaveth. The old Velioth turned their crystal eyes toward her. "Of course. Why do you still fly with us? You've given so much already. Your world is safe now. You could rest. Why keep doing this?" Alaveth was quiet for a long moment. Their crystal body flickered with soft light as they remembered. "When I was young, I believed the galaxy was cold. I believed that no one would ever help anyone without expecting something in return. Your people proved me wrong." They turned back to the window, to the light-streaked void beyond. "Now I fly with you because I understand something I did not understand before. The galaxy is cold. It is vast and dark and full of those who would do harm. But it does not have to stay that way. Every time we answer a call, every time we save a life, we make it a little warmer, a little brighter. That is why we do this, not because it is easy, but because it matters." Maria nodded slowly. She understood. She had always understood. "There's something else I've always wondered," she said. "Why does humanity do this? Why do we always run toward danger instead of away from it?" Alaveth made a sound like distant bells, their version of a laugh. "I asked your mother the same question once, a long time ago. Do you know what she said?" "What?" "She said, because someone has to. And if not us, who?" Maria smiled. It was the answer she had expected. It was the answer she would have given herself. The fleet emerged from hyperspace above a world called Amari Prime. Below them, cities burned. Ships fought in the darkness. People were dying. But they were no longer alone. Admiral Okonkwo's voice echoed through every ship in the fleet. "All vessels, this is Fleet Admiral Okonkwo. We are here to answer a call for help. Remember why we fight. Remember who we are. Remember that somewhere down there people are waiting for someone to care. Let's not disappoint them." The fleet that answered descended toward the burning world. 300 ships, 30 species, one purpose. Behind them, the stars watched in silence. And across the galaxy, in stations and ships and distant worlds, people heard the news. Humanity had done it again. The fleet had answered again. Some shook their heads and called it madness. Some watched and felt ashamed of their own silence. And some, more each year, more each decade, began to wonder if perhaps there was another way to live. A way where strength meant protection, not conquest. Where power meant responsibility, not domination. Where the measure of a species was not how much it could take, but how much it was willing to give. The galaxy was changing, slowly, painfully. One answered call at a time, and it had all started because someone asked for help, and humanity said yes. That was enough. It had always been enough.